Miriam Cates, why should the state reward stay-at-home parents with childcare money?
Well, I don't think it's about rewarding any particular type of parent. I think it's about giving parents choice. So we know that some parents really want to go back to work and resume their career as soon as possible after having a child. Some parents want to stay at home for as long as possible and make the most of those very precious and very quick few years. And I think as a Conservative that we should be in the business of giving people choice.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that the Chancellor did in the budget was to spend an additional £4 billion a year on the early years. So that sounds great in some ways, but the way it's going to be spent is incredibly restricted. You've got to go back to work at a certain point. You've got to work a certain number of hours. You have to put your child in formal childcare. It only is for 39 weeks of year, for the year between particular hours. And it's just not very flexible. And so many people, particularly mothers of under fours, about 2/3 would rather work less if they have the choice.
When that was announced by the Chancellor, you said before you cried. Why did you cry?
I did actually, and I think that's the only time in my time in Parliament when a policy announcement has made me cry. I think I cried partly because I'm a mother myself, and I was very fortunate to have those early years with my children. I did work part-time some of the time, I was a stay-at-home mum others of the time, and I think those years are so quick and so precious. And that bond as a mother that you have with your child in the first 2 years particularly is irreplaceable.
So why is the state so keen to reward mothers or fathers who put their children into childcare?
Well, I think the Treasury operates on a very particular grid, which is all about GDP. And of course, GDP, really all that means is how much money the country is making as a whole. And so the more people you have in the workplace, the better your GDP looks. But it doesn't actually measure how happy people are or what the GDP per capita is, so how much money each individual person or family is. So in theory, if you get 110,000 parents back to work, which is what the government expects it to do, then you've got more people in the workplace and your GDP is bigger. But if you're also employing lots more nursery workers on very low wages, your GDP per capita is lower, and you've potentially got a lot more unhappy children and families who'd rather be together.
Now you've raised this, haven't you, with the government, and what have they told you in Parliament?
Well, I've raised it several times because, as I said, I think it should be much more flexible. And I asked a written parliamentary question recently, which is where you ask a department in writing and they send you a formal response. And I asked whether they'd look at redistributing this money so that it was much more flexible, so each family could have a budget, decide how they want to spend that money, pay granny, spend more time at home, go to work but have more flexible childcare. But they're not interested in that policy at the moment. And as I said, I think this policy is fairly fixed for this Parliament, but I haven't given up hope for the manifesto.
And they refuse to look into it, not even weigh up the cost-benefit analysis?
Well, that's what the written answer said, but obviously I am still pushing, and I think we do need some more evidence, particularly in this country, about what's best for children.
Does it happen elsewhere in the world? Other countries do it?
Yes, I mean, our country is really an outlier in the way we treat families, and one of the reasons for that is our taxation system. So we don't recognise families or households in the taxation system. So it's actually disadvantageous to have children. Whereas in other countries, they recognise how important it is for the future of society to have children and bring them up. So they recognise families and give families a tax boost in the tax system, and we just don't do that here.
So do you think stay-at-home parents are not seen as valid as working parents by the Treasury or by the government?
I absolutely think that, but I think it's more about not valuing children. Because I think if you ask 9-month-old baby, do you want to go into nursery with all these other children, or do you want mummy? I think we probably know what that baby might say. Or daddy. Now that's not to say there aren't brilliant childcare providers out there, and it does work for many, many families. But there's a good biological reason why babies are very attached, particularly to mummy, in those first couple of years of life. And why are we working against biology? Why not just help people to have that choice, if that's what they want, to be flexible enough to have those first couple of years more time with baby?
Well, the government says 4 in 10, I think, of working mothers of under 14s would give up work if they could afford it. This may be a way to help them afford it.
Exactly. If you just redistributed that money to give people choice in a tax break or a voucher, then people could choose how much and when they wanted to work. And remember, we're only talking 0 to 4. It's a very tiny amount of years before children start school when you really have that opportunity to spend time with them. It's not for their whole childhood, so we could do much better on the flexibility front.
Well, Miriam Cates, the Tory MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, thank you for joining us today on GBNews. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
And we can speak to the man himself, Christopher Hope, who did that interview for us. Good morning to you, Christopher. Look, I'm a mum. Resonates with me, this. Speaks a lot of sense to those of us who are, trying to raise kids. It's ever so important. No more important job, arguably.
That's right. It's a live issue in certain parts of the Tory backbenches. Miriam Cates is one to watch for the future of the Tory party. And she asked the government, why won't you even look at the idea of, rather than giving money to working mothers, give it to any parents who want to stay at home and then allow them to be at home and raise maybe happier children. The government's own figures, as we said there, 4 in 10 mothers of 0 to 14-year-olds want to spend more time at home. Why can't they? Other countries offer family tax credits. France allow you to move your tax allowance to your partner if your partner isn't working. In Estonia, they give you, I think it's 300 or so euros for the first baby, and then 30 euros per month for the second baby to a certain age. So it happens elsewhere, but the government appears to be set on getting working parents, mums or dads, back to work as soon as they can.